Okay, so get this, you ready? 1 in 3 Americans, 1 in 3, they're dealing with chronic inflammation and they don't even know it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, crazy, right? So today, we are diving deep, and I mean deep, into that hidden danger zone, inflammation. We're talking about sugar, we're talking about oils, all those sneaky culprits, right?
Yay.
We're going through that documentary, A Spoonful of Poison. Everyone's talking about it, plus some research articles, the real deal stuff.
Yeah.
To really separate those food facts from the fiction.
Love it. What I find so fascinating about this deep dive is that it's not just about slapping a label on food and saying, okay, this is good, this is bad. It's about really understanding how these foods are affecting our bodies, at a much deeper level. And inflammation, it's like the silent troublemaker just lurking in the background.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the experts in the documentary, they actually compared it to a fire, like a smoldering fire inside your body. I know. And that visual, it really stuck with me. And the thing is, it's not always a sharp, sudden pain. It could be sneaky too, right?
Right.
Brain fog, stiff joints, that feeling of just being blah.
Exactly. Think of it like your body's sending out an SOS signal. It's like, hey, something's off here. Pay attention. And the thing is, when it becomes chronic, that's when we really need to be concerned. Because according to the experts, that chronic inflammation is like a gateway. It opens the door to some serious health problems. Heart disease, type 2 diabetes, even autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, it's scary. And in the documentary, they mention how inflammation stresses your body, making it even harder to process food and absorb those important nutrients.
It's a vicious cycle.
It really is. It's like a domino effect.
Absolutely. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The documentary highlighted how fat cells themselves can actually release inflammatory chemicals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So think about it. If you're carrying around extra weight and constantly feeding your body foods that just fuel that inflammation, you're basically stuck in this loop, this never-ending cycle.
It's a little scary. Okay, so let's break down some of those inflammatory culprits, starting with, of course, sugar. Get ready for some shocking stuff here. That New York Times article you sent from 2016, who knew the sugar industry was so sneaky?
It's eye-opening, isn't it? That article really pulls back the curtain on how powerful industries can actually shape the way we perceive food.
Yeah.
Like back in the 60s, they were funding research that actually downplayed sugar's risks and shifted the blame onto fat. Yeah. And that's how sugar basically snuck its way into dietary guidelines for, decades.
Wow. And now it's everywhere. I mean, the documentary experts were saying it's in almost everything, even stuff we think is healthy.
Yeah.
Like tomato sauce, even chicken broth.
I know, right?
It's crazy.
It's everywhere. And food manufacturers, they love it. It's cheap. It's a natural preservative, and it makes everything taste amazing. But here's the catch, added sugar. It offers absolutely zero nutritional value.
Right.
It's just empty calories that over time can lead to a cascade of health issues.
And they called out liquid sugar as like the worst offender.
Yeah.
Sodas, fruit juices, even those fancy coffee drinks.
Right.
One expert even said, and I'm quoting here, heavy people and diabetics should never touch juice.
I mean, that might sound a little extreme.
A little bit, yeah.
But it highlights a really important point. Fruit juice, even the 100% kind, it lacks the fiber that you find in whole fruit. And that fiber is crucial because it helps slow down sugar absorption. So when you're drinking juice, you're essentially getting this concentrated sugar hit. And that's not ideal, especially if you're watching your weight or your blood sugar levels.
It's a good point. It's a good reminder that even natural sugars, like the ones you find in fruit, it's all about moderation, right?
Absolutely. It's all about balance.
Speaking of balance, let's get to the confusing world of oils.
Yeah.
You sent over those articles about coconut oil, and I got to say, the documentary really made me rethink this whole health food thing.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It really is. Because remember when everyone and their mother was putting it in their coffee?
Oh, yeah. It was everywhere.
Everywhere.
And, while coconut oil does have some unique properties, the experts in the documentary, they made a compelling argument. They were saying it's actually pretty inflammatory because of its high saturated fat content.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I didn't know that.
And they even cited this study, I think it was in the Journal of Nutrition, that found coconut oil actually raised LDL cholesterol significantly.
And LDL, that's the bad cholesterol, right?
That's the one, yeah.
The one that clogs the arteries.
Exactly. The one you don't want too much of.
Okay. So it's not so good for the heart then, I'm guessing.
Well, that's the thing. It's not so clear-cut. Coconut oil has its pros and cons, but this study definitely raised some eyebrows.
So it's not the health hero we thought it was, I guess.
It's more complicated than that. It's about balance, remember.
Right, right. Okay, what about other oils then? Because you also send over some research on the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. And to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on what that even means.
Don't worry, it's a common point of confusion. So basically, both omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, they're essential for our health. But like you said earlier, it's all about balance. Now, our modern diets, they tend to be overloaded with omega-6s.
Okay.
And you find these a lot in processed foods and certain vegetable oils like soybean oil and corn oil.
Ah, okay.
And the problem is, having too many omega-6s, it can actually contribute to, you guessed it, inflammation.
Inflammation, there it is.
It's everywhere. So think of it like a seesaw, right? You need both sides balanced for it to work properly. Now, omega-3s, on the other hand, they have anti-inflammatory effects. And we get those from fatty fish like salmon, walnuts, flax seeds, things like that.
So it's not that all vegetable oils are bad then.
Yeah.
It's just we need to be mindful of the types and how much we're using, and then making sure we're getting those good inflammation-fighting omega-3s from other sources.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay.
And the documentary, they also talked about the quality of oils. They said that those giant, cheap jugs of vegetable oil you find at the store
Yeah.
might not be the healthiest choice.
Really? Why is that? I always wondered about that.
It comes down to how they're processed. So they explained that the way those cheaper oils are made, it can actually damage the delicate fats, making them more prone to oxidation.
Okay.
And oxidation leads to, guess what?
Inflammation.
Inflammation, that's right. So just like with everything else, quality matters.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what should we be looking for then? When it comes to choosing oils, I mean.
They recommend choosing smaller batches of high-quality oils, like extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, things like that, and storing them properly to prevent them from going rancid.
Makes sense. Great tips. Now, are you ready for a controversial one?
Hit me.
Let's talk about those little colorful packets that we all thought were the answer to our sugar problems. Artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, the days of sugar-free everything.
Exactly.
The documentary really dug into some recent research on these, and it really makes you wonder if they're as harmless as we thought,
Yeah. I mean, did they have any, specific examples?
One that really stuck out was a study on erythritol.
Erythritol, okay.
You've probably seen it on an ingredient list. It's in a lot of those keto and low-carb products.
Right, right.
And it is a natural sweetener, but this study actually linked it to an increased risk of heart attacks and strokes.
Wow. I had no idea. I mean, I guess it just goes to show that even if something says natural on the label, doesn't mean it's automatically healthy or safe.
Yeah.
Especially not in large amounts.
Exactly. And, it's important to remember everyone's different. What works for one person might not work for another.
Right, right.
So it's all about paying attention to your own body and how you feel.
Good advice.
And, approaching all sweeteners, even the natural ones, with a critical eye.
Right.
Just be mindful.
Good advice. It's a lot to unpack here. Before we get to practical shopping tips and all that, I wanted to touch on a couple other food myths that the documentary tackled.
Okay. Yeah.
Like GMOs.
Right.
Are they really less nutritious?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yes, it's so confusing.
The documentary did a good job, I think, of presenting both sides, acknowledging that there's a lot of conflicting information out there.
Yeah.
But they did emphasize that more research is definitely needed on the long-term effects of GMOs. But there's also some evidence that suggests that modern farming practices, including genetic modification, it might be impacting the nutritional value of our food.
Interesting.
Yeah, and one visual they shared that was really striking was this picture of what corn used to look like compared to the giant ears we see in supermarkets today.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
And it really makes you wonder if maybe we're sacrificing those nutrients for the sake of, larger yields and a longer shelf life.
It really makes you think, huh?
It does.
Okay. Last but not least, we have to talk about the gluten-free craze. Because it's everywhere these days, right? It seems like everyone's gone gluten-free.
It's true. And, the documentary actually addressed this whole gluten-free hype.
Yeah.
And they made a really good point that for most people who don't actually have celiac disease or a real gluten sensitivity,
Right.
going gluten-free isn't necessarily healthier.
Right. Yeah. They even said that a lot of the gluten-free stuff is even more processed than the regular stuff.
Exactly.
Which kind of defeats the purpose, right?
They were saying that to make gluten-free products appealing, because, gluten is what gives bread that chewy texture.
Right, right.
Manufacturers have to replace it with something else.
Right.
And they often turn to refined starches, sugar, gums, all these things to kind of mimic that texture and flavor.
Yeah.
But all those added ingredients, they can really mess with your blood sugar.
And isn't it ironic then that people are choosing gluten-free to be healthier?
Right. Right.
And it's actually doing the opposite.
They highlighted a study that found a slice of gluten-free bread can actually spike your blood sugar higher than regular bread.
Wow, that's crazy.
Because those starches and sugars, they're essentially doing the same thing that gluten does in terms of your blood sugar response.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically what I'm hearing is if you don't have to avoid gluten for a medical reason, you're not doing yourself any favors.
Unless you love the taste and you're okay with those trade-offs, it's something to consider.
Right. And then maybe choosing whole grains instead of these highly processed gluten-free alternatives.
There you go.
Okay.
See, you're getting it.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Okay, so speaking of making healthier choices, let's get to those shopping tips you mentioned. Because there's so much information, it's easy to feel overwhelmed when you walk into the grocery store. So many choices in the grocery store, it can be overwhelming. Where do we even start? Give us the cheat sheet.
Yeah.
How do we shop smarter with all this new knowledge?
Well, the documentary had one really simple but powerful tip.
Okay.
Stick to the perimeter of the grocery store.
Oh, I've heard that before.
Have you?
Yeah, isn't that usually where they put all the fresh produce?
Exactly. Less processed, generally whole food options. You'll find fresh meat, seafood, dairy products.
Right, right.
They didn't completely rule out the inner aisles, though.
Okay, because sometimes you need like a can of beans or some peanut butter, to get you through the week.
Exactly.
Yeah. You can't live on fresh produce alone.
Well, you could.
No, I guess. Yeah.
But it's nice to have some variety, right?
Variety is good.
But the documentary really urged viewers to be smart shoppers when you're in those inner aisles.
Okay.
Read those labels carefully. Look out for added sugars, unhealthy fats, and those ingredient lists that are like a mile long and sound like a chemistry experiment?
Oh, yeah.
Steer clear of those.
Okay, those are the no-nos. I'm getting it. So reading labels, that's key.
That's key.
But any tips for actually decoding those labels? Because sometimes they're so confusing.
Yeah, one expert had a good rule of thumb for sugar.
Okay.
If the product has more than 10 grams of sugar per serving,
Okay.
it's pass, probably.
10 grams and it's a no-go. Got it.
Easy to remember, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
pay close attention to serving sizes. Okay.
Manufacturers, they're sneaky.
They are.
They'll use these tiny serving sizes, make those calories and all that look better than they actually are.
Sneaky. And what about organic and grass-fed options? Because they talked about those in the documentary too, and those can be pricier.
For sure. And the documentary acknowledged that not everyone can afford to buy all organic all the time.
Right. It can be expensive.
They suggested that if you are going to prioritize, start with produce that tends to have higher pesticide residues.
Like what are we talking about here? Berries, leafy greens, things like that.
Okay, so things with thinner skins, things like that.
Exactly. And if you can, try to buy local.
Support your local farmers.
There you go. You get it. Quality over quantity.
I like that.
Smaller local farms, they often prioritize those sustainable practices,
So important. Okay, good to know. Any other shopping tips?
Oh, they were also big on cooking more meals at home.
Makes sense.
That way you have control, right? You know what's going into your food.
You're not at the mercy of some restaurant or whatever.
Exactly. And they also emphasized meal prepping and planning.
Okay.
Having those healthy options ready to go.
So you're not starving and then grabbing whatever's easiest.
Exactly. Because when you're hungry, you're not always making the best choices. Setting yourself up for success.
I love that. As we wrap up this deep dive, one thing that really stuck with me was this idea of mindful eating.
Yes.
And the experts talk about, tuning into your body.
Yeah.
And really paying attention to how different foods make us feel.
It's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's not about saying, I'm never eating sugar again, or I'm only eating organic from now on. It's about listening to your body.
Because our bodies are actually pretty smart, right?
They are. They'll tell us what they need if we learn how to listen.
It's about finding that balance, like you said.
Balance. That's the key word.
Not being afraid to enjoy food.
Exactly.
Food can be both nourishing and pleasurable.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This deep dive has given us so much to think about when it comes to inflammation, sugar, oils, all of it.
Yeah, making choices that really, truly nourish our bodies.
There you go.
Wow, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface, though.
There's always more to learn, right?
Always. It's a journey.
It's a journey, not a race.
I like that. So true. Until next time, keep those questions coming. And remember, progress, not perfection.
I love it.